everybody, and thanks for joining us this week on Up in the Air. I'm Lydia Knox, and joining me here is Mike Kwasnick.
Thanks, Lydia. We have a lot of interesting stories this week, such as the New Orleans heat records, how wetlands and agriculture are affecting climate change, and even a story on how chocolate is related to meteorology.
Sounds great. And as always, Casey will stop by later at the Climate Wall with the details on the weather that we can expect for the near future.
We'll have all that and more coming up. But first, here's Update in the Air.
During one of the country's hottest and driest summers, New Orleans quietly set a mind-boggling record. On 43 nights, the temperature did not drop below 80 degrees in New Orleans, according to the Louisiana state climatologist. The previous record was only 13 nights in 2010. It's unbelievable considering on average in the summer, New Orleans has around 2 nights at or just above 80 degrees. These warm temperatures are hard on people's body and utility bills. In particular, elderly people are at risk during these times, as is the entire homeless population and anyone with an illness. Keeping in mind around 30% of New Orleans' population lives in poverty. These records are mainly due to climate change. The air is capable of holding more water vapor, so as the global temperatures increase, so do humidity levels. More clouds are able to form, trapping some of the day's heat, which also leads to increased surface warming. The more moisture that's in the air, the higher the dew point, and the warmer the overnight temperature. All of this is to say that our nights are going to continue to warm up, and it wouldn't be surprising to see more cities topple records like New Orleans did in the near future.
Did you know that ozone in the atmosphere is measured from space? That's right. 2 satellites, METOP-A and METOP-B, launched by the European Organization for the Exploitation of Meteorological Satellites, or EUMETSAT, in 2006 and 2012, allow scientists to measure how much ozone is actually present in the upper atmosphere and near the surface. These 2 satellites orbit in a polar orbit about 817 kilometers above Earth. A polar orbit is a special kind of orbit where it flies over the poles of the Earth, as illustrated here. Ozone is crucial for the absorption of ultraviolet light from the sun. However, it is also considered a pollutant when near the surface. Sadly, METOP-A is nearing the end of its useful life in space, as satellites don't last forever. But there is good news. There is going to be a replacement for METOP-A, as METOP-C is scheduled to be launched in 2018.
Most do not associate Africa with the high-tech sphere of space. However, in recent years, many countries on the continent have woken up to the usefulness of space technology. Sub-Saharan Africa, Nigeria, and South Africa are leading the charge. Both countries have recognized the usefulness of satellites for Earth observations, telecommunications, and advancing space science. They have funded and overseen a number of launches. In early 2015, a satellite built for South Africa and Russia was launched. It provides all-weather, day and night radar imagery for the South African military. Earth observation satellites can collect data on areas of importance to a country's economy and well-being, such as agriculture, natural disasters, and elections. The South African National Space Agency, or SANZA, often provides disaster monitoring post-disaster assessment for South Africa and the region. It also monitors space weather effects and forecasts, which are crucial for aviation. It's clear that space technology and satellites have a plethora of possible benefits for the future.
The Central Asian deserts appear to be even more resilient than previously believed. A study led by the University of Washington has suggested that strong westerly winds blowing from the west have been mostly unchanged for about 42 million years. According to the lead author, Alexis Licht, our study is one of the first to provide geological constraints on the wind patterns in deep time. What this means is that it is a study that used the rock record to assist in trying to recreate the climate of the time. For example, the study used rock from the lowest plateau in northwest China to show that the dust had been piling up starting 22 to 25 million years ago. Back then, the Himalayan mountains were a lot lower, and the air had a lot more carbon dioxide. Regardless of the climate changing, we can expect to have strong winds in Central Asia.
It turns out climate change could have an impact on the world's supply of chocolate, but one candy maker is already hard at work trying to prevent anything bad from happening. Mars Chocolate, the maker of candy brands like M&M and Snickers, employs a small team of meteorologists who are dedicated to analyzing the impacts of weather on the chocolate business. Creating chocolate candies involves many ingredients. The Mars meteorologists are in charge of examining current weather patterns, then working with other departments to see how these patterns could impact suppliers. They take note of upcoming events that could create problems, like a storm that could delay shipping, as well as larger issues like climate change. While much of the Mars meteorologists' jobs is focused on near-term weather forecasting, they also look months and years in the future, examining issues such as global warming. Cocoa farmers face a higher risk of disease, flooding, and landslides as a result of climate change. According to Climate.gov reports, climate change could cause areas that were once optimal for growing cocoa to be unusable.
New research has led some scientists to believe that climate change is due to reasons other than industry. A new study refutes the conventional thought of the increased emissions of methane are due to fossil fuel burning. This study suggests the strong spike in methane is largely because of biological sources, such as swamp emissions, cow burps, or rice fields. The study's findings conclude that microbes have been the main culprit of these large methane releases. In addition, the tropics have been shown to be a main source of these gassy releases. We'll be back in a moment with more. Thanks for tuning back in.
We now have a special feature on natural gas and soybeans.
Hi, I'm Helen Guza.
And I'm Corey Barwat.
We're here to update you on the soybean meal and natural gas futures.
Natural gas prices have been trending lower ever since we have been on spring break, thanks to a change in the weather pattern.
The soybean meal futures have also seen some changes. Let's take a look at what's happened to the soy meal prices between March 8th and 14th. Currently, the soybean growing process is about 50% complete in Brazil and just beginning in Argentina. Last week, the May contract for soybean meal prices started out staying fairly consistent. However, on Friday, March 13th, the market saw a strong bearish trend with prices. This can be seen by the current stock price of $323.6, which is much lower than the 20-day average of $334.1 and the 100-day average of $337.5. The World Agricultural Supply and Demand, or the WASDE report, was released last Tuesday at noon by the USDA. The report stated that the projected supply of soybeans for the season will remain unchanged from February's report. Brazil's soybean crop remained at 94.5 million metric tons, and Argentina's crop remained at 56 million metric tons. The soybean crush and exports also remained the same as forecasted. This caused the market to stay fairly consistent for the beginning of last week. The market saw a drop in soybean meal prices on Friday. A factor that has most likely contributed to this drop is the strength of the U.S. dollar against other forms of currency. On Friday last week, the U.S. dollar climbed 0.9%, reaching 100, which is the highest value it has seen since April 2003. The Brazilian real has simultaneously seen a drop to its weakest value since 2004. This means that soybeans and other foreign commodities will have lower values when traded in dollars. This will most likely cause the price of soybean meal to stay low. Let's take a look at the weather in South America. Over the past month, Argentina's rainfall has been approximately average, whereas the major growing region of Mato Grosso, Brazil, has been slightly drier than average. Temperatures in Brazil for the next week are projected to be just slightly cooler with a typical precipitation. On the other hand, Argentina is expected to have warmer and drier weather.
The week of March 8th through the 14th saw much warmer temperatures than the first week of March. Natural gas futures fell in New York, capping a weekly decline, as milder U.S. weather hindered demand for the heating fuel. Forecasts showed that above normal temperatures across the contiguous U.S. through March 18th will give way to a weaker push of cool air the following 10 days. With the cold now isolated in the Northeast for the rest of the month, the resulting heating demand will likely not offset production. The early start to the injection season has reignited selling interest throughout the market. Production of the fuel will climb in 2015 for the 10th straight year, rising 5% to 78.39 billion cubic feet a day from the previous year. The government raised its growth estimate from 3.1% in the December report. Natural gas NYMEX contracts for May were at a high point of $2.92 in the middle of last week. However, these prices have continued to drop after the warm temperatures to $2.80 at closing on Monday. This indicates that gas supplies are more than able to meet demand. The U.S. Energy Information Administration said that natural gas storage in the U.S. fell by 198 billion cubic feet last week to 1.512 trillion cubic feet. This is 46.9% above year-earlier levels and 13% below the 5-year average for this time of year. This indicates producers have made up for most of last winter's unusually strong demand.
We hope you enjoyed our market analysis and found something informative about the update.
For Up in the Air, I'm Corey Barwat.
And I'm Helen Guza.
Welcome back to the show, everybody. Hey, Lydia, how was your homecoming?
It was great. You know, I stayed dry. The rain really didn't damper out things too much. What about you?
It was a good one. We had a fun time at the football game.
Yeah, absolutely. We finally won, so that was really encouraging. And I noticed it was feeling much cooler outside, a little bit more fall-like. Casey, did you notice the same?
I did, Lydia. It has been feeling a lot more like fall the past couple days, which is good news for the fall foliage here in Pennsylvania.
Yeah, absolutely. I've even noticed some of those leaves are changing a little bit more. So what can you tell us about that?
That's right. As we look into the latest fall foliage monitor as of October 10th, we do have some peak coverage up here in Maine, New Hampshire, Vermont, and even upstate New York, which is pretty normal for being in mid-October, although we do have little to no coverage in Massachusetts, Connecticut, southern New York, and the big story, obviously, which we care about most here in Pennsylvania. This has been mostly not been from the drought that we've been experiencing the past couple of months. So we haven't been, but now that we've been getting into more fall-like temperatures, hopefully we will start to see more colors changing here in the next few weeks as October comes to an end, as we all love to see those colors change. Moving on to next week's pattern, from October 20th, you can see, or 21st, you can see this upper pattern, this ridge over sitting over eastern Pennsylvania that's associated with warmer and drier air. There is a trough over here, but now moving on to our temperature outlook for October 18th to the 24th, pretty much the entire United States is above normal temperatures. As you can see, even State College here in a deep red. This extends to the Midwest and even over to the western United States. There is this little splotch over here in the Northwest we'll be experiencing below normal temperatures. But now as we move on to the precipitation outlook, this isn't looking very good for the drought experiences that I've been talking about here in Pennsylvania and New England states, as there's nothing going on, as there's no above normal precipitation expected. But there is below normal temperature expected down here in Texas and the 4 panel states. But the big story is over here in the northwestern United States, as we'll be expecting above normal precipitation for October 18th to the 24th, which is great news for this drought that we've been in for so long. It seems like it's never ending. So although this above normal precipitation might not help so much, it definitely won't make the drought worse. And moving on to the drought monitor, which we've been talking about, over here in Pennsylvania and New England states, we do see some darker colors, which with some reds, and which doesn't correlate to anything good. As I've been saying, it's been the main reason why our colors in Pennsylvania hasn't completely popped out yet. We haven't experienced that cold snap, and also we haven't gotten much rain here. There is also some drought down here in Atlanta, and but like I said, like we always say, the drought over here in the western United States, They will see some relief, like I mentioned, for the precipitation outlook having above normal in the northwestern United States. But over here in California, mostly Los Angeles area, that deep red just doesn't seem to be letting up, and it really won't anytime soon, unfortunately. But that's all I have here at the Climate Wall. Let's take it back to Lydia and Mike at the desk.
Thanks, Casey. That's actually all we have this week. I'm Mike Wozniak.
And I'm Lydia Knox. See you next week, Up in the Air.